Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Dawn James, author of the Raise Your Vibration trilogy, an audiobook, Why Are We Here? She has a fascinating story of how experiencing her physical death unveiled her spiritual life. Dawn, welcome to the program.
Hi, Johnny. Thanks for having me. Very excited.
Awesome. You have experienced some very extreme circumstances, being blind, deaf, and mute before the age of 10, and at one point in your teens, you were paralyzed from the waist down. The audiobook, Why Are We Here? What prompted you to record how your first life came to an end and your second life began?
Yeah, thank you. I had to really dissect and analyze all of these spiritual phenomena I've been experiencing my entire life. And I got to a point as an adult where I started getting a little more comfortable opening up. I kept a lot to myself for decades. Shortly after my spiritual awakening, light workers, energy practitioners started coming into my life. I felt more comfortable sharing. And so I decided to record Why Are We Here as a way of sharing my experience on the other side, as a way of sharing with listeners some things to pay attention to in your life that maybe giving you a hint, it's maybe not the path you're on that you're supposed to be on. So I shared that recording to talk about how I kind of withdrew from my first life and some of the things I noticed were changing. And then, of course, when I had my spiritual awakening, I got a lot of lessons about living and existing here on this space that we're in. And I wanted to share that with listeners that there's so much more to us than this physical shell.
Agreed. Much more. You mentioned light workers. We'll definitely get to the spiritual awakening questions as well, but what is your definition of a light worker and how did you discover, in other words, meet these people or how did they approach you?
I was really a 3D girl, very business-minded, very dominant corporate world. It was, 1 + 1 = 2. And if I can touch it, feel it, it's real. After I had my wake-up call in 2003, I had to try and figure out what was happening to me. My senses were heightened. I was extremely empathic. Thank goodness for a little magazine called Vitality Magazine in Canada that has holistic spiritual information, events, practitioners, and I literally went through that magazine looking for someone who I felt comfortable talking to. And so that's my first introduction. Light worker is a term that my definition is someone who is aware of the non-physical world, someone who is fully understanding that they are spiritual and physical beings, and they have chosen to walk a path of helping others heal or helping others find their true nature. And true nature means we are more than physical. So helping others heal in different ways. There are many ways to heal ourselves, and light workers tend to either go towards the energy side, or whether you're a naturopath or Reiki or a whole bunch of emotional healing, there's different levels we can heal each other.
In other words, the light workers are the good guys, to say the very least. At this time, on our timeline here in the 21st century, we hear a lot of discussions about ascension, densities, third density, moving away from the third density, and so on. I think there's 5 or 6 or 7 of them altogether. The light workers, do they have anything to do with that? Are they ascended beings or just much more conscious?
From my experiences and for the people in my, the spiritual people in my circles, it's a matter of getting more conscious about not just your reality, but the possibilities of what you can create. In terms of ascension, I'm not into labels, but what I will say is the more aware you are of your nature, and that includes your emotional state, your mental state, your physical and spiritual state, the more you are aware of that, the easier it is for you to make choices that are going to be beneficial. And some of those choices will naturally cause you to ascend. For example, I've had friends who, they smoked, they drank, and then they had this wake-up call, whatever form it came in, and all of a sudden they decided, I'm not going to smoke and drink anymore. I need to take care of my body. My body is a temple. they go on this quest to get well. And so would you say they ascended? Perhaps, realizing there's a better, simpler, easier way to live, more loving way to be. So I think ultimately we're all on a journey to go to our original home, which I don't believe is this physical state. And there are different ways to get there. Ascension is a term. One way I've heard it used is we all are evolving. We're evolving at different rates. Some of us are less attached to this physical world.
Right.
Such as myself. I'm not attached to anything at all here.
Good for you.
And so it's easier when you're not attached to be able to elevate your mind, elevate your speech, elevate your heart, and begin to be a lighter being, quite literally. And so that is something that I think we will eventually all get there, but not at the same time.
People will progress at different rates, which is pretty consistent with what I've heard before. The wake-up call and the spiritual awakening, are they the same thing?
For me, yes. I literally ceased to exist in a physical form, March of 2003, and I realized my spiritual essence. And that was the beginning of a series of very intense experiences that I had for almost 2 years. Those experiences opened me up to understanding abilities and gifts and capabilities and things I never paid attention to ever in my life. So that wake-up call really got me understanding how interconnected we really are to each other. What I say to you, the vibration of my voice is going through you. The intention behind my words is impacting you, right? And if we're not conscious of that ripple effect, what are we really doing? Why are we really here? Are we just here to, eat, work, pay taxes, and...
I hope not. And chase the trophy girl or guy and the trophy job, most expensive, prominent golf club membership. Yeah.
And you can't take it with you when you're gone. I mean, the pharaohs tried, but it didn't work, did it?
It did not. No, you're right. So how do we, for someone that makes a conscious decision, I want to raise my spirituality, I want to get to higher ground, I don't know how to get there, and I can't say this to my friends, but I don't think that going to fill in the name of the local mega church, I don't think that going to this establishment is going to get me there. How do they approach it, or do they have to wait until it happens to them?
I was given a very profound message, and those words literally brought me back to consciousness. I was told, it was whispered in my ear, all you need is within you. And those words have become my prayer, my mantra. It is what I live by. And to answer your question, what can you do to start realizing your spiritual side? You have to look within and start asking yourself some tough questions. And, I take people through different programs. I do spiritual mentoring. And one of the first places we start is we look at pain. And the reason we look at pain and experiences that have caused trauma or pain is because these things keep us locked down. And literally, the subconscious holds on to these things. And until we look at it, study it, and release it, it's very difficult to live a spiritual life if you are in pain. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, because it's like carrying around a lot of luggage. I don't know if you'd call it a Pandora's box or going down another rabbit hole, but when we talk about pain, many are of the opinion that that could come from a previous life or a soul contract from a previous life. So it's pretty significant either way to find the origin of the pain.
We have to. Yeah. And it's beyond pain. There's 3 pillars that we have to look at. I talk about pain, I talk about shame, and I talk about blame, because these experiences keep us in this loop and we don't seem to be able to move forward. So you really have to start walking through these things and understanding them and understanding how they impacted you, and then saying, okay, I get that now. Is this really part of me, or this thing happened? I'm still me. What do I want to do from here now that I understand how this thing may have affected me up until this point? You now can come to a conscious choice. Do you want to be enslaved by this? Or do you want to say, I learned the lesson and let's shift over here now, because this is where I need to start focusing myself. Let me release this now that I understand it maybe on a different level as an adult, because a lot of these painful emotions happen in childhood. A lot of this trauma happens under the age of 10, and it sticks deep into our subconscious. So in order to really begin the journey of being more spiritual, you have to lighten up. You have to look at these experiences and study yourself and examine, where are you today relative to this? And is it time to let it go so that you can have more space in your being to fully understand what it means to be spiritual? So that's where I have people start.
What are some of the signs that someone is about to awaken?
Ooh, I love that question, Johnny. There are
Inquiring minds want to know.
Wow, how much time do we have? I'm going to take you through my experience.
Plenty.
I'm also going to share some other experiences, and
Excellent idea. That's exactly what we want to do. Go ahead.
Here are some of the signs, right? We live in a certain way. We get into this pattern of behavior. We shop, we buy the same things, we eat the same things, we do the same things every day. There comes a point you start to look at things like it looks unfamiliar, or you start getting uncomfortable, or you no longer are interested in these things. They've lost their glitz and glow, right? Mm-hmm. It's no longer appealing to you. That is a sign that you are about to make a shift. When things start looking unfamiliar, they get uncomfortable, you totally lose interest. The guy who loves to surf every day at 6 a.m. and all of a sudden it's like you got stomach pain, you can't even stand straight. Something's coming, and that something is trying to shift you. That's one thing. The second thing is some people, their intuition starts to get very strong, and they may get hints, glimpses, even visions through dreams, or they start paying attention to synchronicities, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. Some people get the deja vu experience. Wait a minute, I've been here before. This is a replay. And they realize their life feels like a movie, and they're ready to go, hold on. Can we get to the next scene?
This may or may not be related, but since you brought up synchronicity, angel numbers, and we all know what they are. When someone starts seeing angel numbers on the clock, on a sign, on a license plate, is that part of this journey, or is that something completely different?
I wouldn't say it's part of the journey of waking up. What is part of the journey of waking up is you start to notice things you didn't notice before. I'll give you a quick example. There was a short period where I met 6 women, all had the name Barbara. And I thought, how odd is that? Like within 4 months, I met 6 people with the same first name. And I pause and I go, wait a minute, this is a little strange, So whether it's angel numbers, or maybe you're meeting a whole bunch of people with the same name, or maybe you keep finding a stray cat, there's something going on that keeps trying to get your attention. Now, that could be a part of it. For me, when I start meeting a whole bunch of people with the same first name, I pay attention, because it just keeps coming again and again and again. And I go through series where I'll meet like 6 Michaels or 6 Barbaras, or it's just very odd.
It is indeed. I brought that up because I was talking to someone yesterday and we were talking about this kind of stuff. And I said, have you ever read the book Proof of Heaven? And she says, you're joking, right? My mom gave me that book yesterday and it's on the table downstairs. I thought, okay, that's a little weird, but I can see a situation where it's much more intense. Like you meet 3 girls named Johanna and you think, wait a minute, someone trying to get my attention?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So I think part of waking up is becoming more conscious of things. I know for me, there were certain physical things started showing up for me. Like I could not stand meat. I couldn't even walk in the grocery store where the meat was. It's like I was picking up the consciousness of these animals. And it was like you get sensitive to things that you weren't sensitive to before. So these are all how your awareness, your senses start to get a little more intense, or you start feeling more the subtleness of life. You're not just in the density of life now. You start picking up more senses and, ESP and all these things, so that you're paying attention and you're able to see things with a different lens. Some people may have weight gain, weight loss. I've heard that happen. Other people will suddenly shun eating certain things they used to like. And, for me, I lost my appetite for 3 months. That was a big red flag right there.
There's definitely something going on, at least physical, and probably maybe triggered by something else. These circumstances that you're describing, are they the signs, or are they some of the after effects of awakening, or is that different?
From my journey, after I woke up in 2003, there's 4 huge lessons I share in that audiobook, Why Are We Here? One of the biggest lessons of the 4 is remembering that you have a choice. We always have a choice. And for those of you listening that may have subtle or major addictions, or you're a creature of habit, you always have a choice to change. Right? It's whether or not you're conscious of that choice. After I woke up, I became an observer of my life. I paid attention to everything. I did what I said. Some of the metaphysical changes, Johnny, included my hearing. My hearing got very astute, sense of smell. I was hyper electrosensitive. I mean, I couldn't even turn on a computer. My aura would actually... You ever have someone take their nails and run it down a chalkboard?
Not a pleasant experience.
Right. Well, if anybody turned on a device, that's what it felt like was going through my aura. It was extremely painful. And so I ended up being a nature girl overnight. I would be out in the forest for 4 or 5 hours a day. I had to be outside. So you tend to find you're getting pulled and called into things that you weren't doing before. Another thing about waking up is, for me, I had more compassion. I became softer. I spoke softly. I had more compassion for the people in my life. That was a big one. It's kind of like having a heart surgery. I started to feel what other people felt. So if you were sad, I felt it. If you were stressed, I felt it. And when you start feeling other people's energy, this is where I think the compassion came about. And eventually I gravitated to sound healing. I studied different healing modalities, but I ended up doing sound healing. But there's this compassion because I feel what you feel. And I can understand what you're going through. The more I understand you, right, the more I can attend to you, the gentler our relationship's going to be, right? Because we're more connected.
Much more connected. I think that makes a lot of sense. Going back to the point when the first life came to an end and your second life began, first life came to an end. Was that like a near-death experience, or what exactly was that?
So I didn't have any vocabulary on what occurred. The vocabulary came almost a year later. So the night that I went to bed, thought it was a normal night. Mind you, I hadn't been eating for 3 months, so that wasn't a normal time. I started getting some very strange sensations in my lower back, and it kept moving up and up my spine, and it was like contractions. So some women can relate to what I'm saying. But there came a point where my heart just stopped beating. I literally heard my heart stop beating. And when I left my physical body, it wasn't a near-death experience that many have described about, traveling the tunnel, seeing loved ones. This had nothing to do with that. This was, I felt like someone rubbed the lamp and the genie came out. And when the genie came out, there was nothing but light. It was the most beautiful, magnificent, loving experience I've ever had in my life. Because in that moment where I ceased to physically exist, I connected to every living thing on this planet, every person, everything. And it would take me quite a while to get the right wording. I ended up going to an ashram. I would drive there. It was about an hour from my home, and I would sit and talk to the Swami. I had so many questions. You can imagine after having that experience. And he told me the term in his country is called Samadhi. Samadhi is where the individual consciousness is released from the physical body, and that consciousness it merges with unity consciousness. So there is no you. That's the end of that story. I thought it was a one-way trip, honestly. Yeah.
It's very interesting. So is that a state that can be achieved through meditation, or is it just a much more heightened experience that kind of goes beyond that? What exactly is it?
Having many, many conversations with the Swami after I woke up, he said to me, there are several levels of yoga and the spiritual yoga. And the final level is where you attain enlightenment and the Samadhi experience. He says, you would have to have done a lot of deep meditation. And I go, excuse me? I can't even sit still for 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? He goes, well, yes, sir. Then he said to me, you may not have done it in this lifetime, but he says, this didn't just happen to you. You've done this. You did do meditation before. You were working towards this, and this is where you end up realizing it. He says, but you just don't have this experience. He says, you have been meditating for many lifetimes. this is the time that you are to wake up because you're here to teach other people to be conscious. And I went, whoa, what do you mean teach other people, right? I mean, I just left my day job. You're telling me I'm going to be teaching the masses? Hello? I'm a number cruncher. I'm not
You're an ascended being. I think that's what he was trying to tell you. Now that you bring it up, you have been here before. You have done this before. You have obviously been reincarnated because, like many of us. So what has this experience taught you about reincarnation?
Well, there's 3 profound things I have been consciously doing since this experience. Number 1, this experience has helped me realize the importance of understanding karma. You talk about reincarnation? Yes. So there's a belief that what we've done before will influence, dictate, or shape our current situation. I'm a firm believer in karma, and I have been consciously clearing karma with people. And there could be people I meet within 10 minutes. I understand our connection. Wherever we met, whatever timeline, I recognize them. And if I have that understanding, I will speak with them and I will find a way to clear karma between us because I recognize we're meeting. The other thing that I've learned from this experience, Johnny, is just how powerful we are when we get really clear on what feeds our soul and what feeds our heart. The more we connect to what brings us joy and what we already have come here with, there are things you can do that no one else can do. And they're like, oh my God, how does Johnny do this? He does it like in his sleep, like he's just breathing. There are things you can do so easily. Those are your gifts. What are you doing with your gifts? How are you applying your gifts to your lifestyle or to your vocation? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Right. But what if that person, me or whoever, is not aware of what their gifts actually are?
This is why I give you the prompt. There are things you do that are so easy to you, you don't even recognize it is special, right? There are things you do that are so simple for you, but it's complicated for someone else. That's a gift. And so you need to pay attention to those things that you naturally do very well. And so where I'm going with this is, since I was 3 years old, I love music. You didn't have to tell me to go practice. I would play for hours at a time. And so when I woke up, I naturally went back to my love of music. It came so natural to me that sound healing was like, yeah, how come I didn't notice this before? This is who I am. So recognizing your gift and recognizing how you express yourself, they kind of go hand in hand. So pay attention, and we need to study that and find ways to express it. Because once you start expressing your gifts consciously, your life becomes easier. You don't feel that resistance. You're not chasing that dollar. You're not chasing this. You know what, Johnny? So many people, if anyone's listening who's an entrepreneur, you're probably burnt out and exhausted, right?
Yeah.
Because you're chasing, running, spreading yourself too thin, thinking you have to do, oh, I need to have 15 social media accounts. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because as soon as you think you have them all, a new one comes out next year. God help us.
Yeah, God help us indeed. I hope he's listening.
Stop chasing. Stop chasing. The big message today, stop chasing the external world. Figure out what you came here with. You're fully loaded. Figure out your bells and whistles.
I spoke with someone just yesterday. She had a past life memory, which was pretty intense. And one of the things that she learned was to stop chasing people and things that are not meant to be part of her life. Do you agree?
Totally agree. When you look at the commonality in a lot of Eastern practices, whether it's meditation, you look at Buddhism and all these things, we are not supposed to be chasing anything. We are supposed to be still and present and awakened and aware. We don't need to react and expect and want and chase and wish and all that. We are supposed to be aware of ourselves and our co-creative abilities. It's already in you. So I encourage people to unplug, go on a digital detox, ask yourself some really prompting questions, and figure yourself out, right? And if you can clear up some of that past trauma and pain, even better. So now you're creating more space in your conscious mind for you to be more co-creative in this world. I mean, that's what it's all about. Why did we come here? We agreed to come here. For what?
We did agree. We did make soul contracts. And one of the funniest stories about soul contracts was a show I saw on Gaia. I think it was Beyond Belief. And the guest was Richard Martini, who had written several books about the afterlife. And this one instance of a man that went into that life between lives space, and he comes across some relatives and friends that he really liked that had passed, and it was a very joyous experience, but he also saw someone that he did not like, who was the mean uncle. And when he finally got a chance to communicate with that uncle, the uncle says, "Don't you remember? We planned this." That just blew me away. And
wow,
we agreed, right? Why we're here. What is our purpose? It's got to be for more than chasing the trophy job and the trophy girl or guy and all that stuff. We all know now that the material things we're not going to be able to take with us, but our consciousness, I think we can.
Absolutely. Yes, because part of being here is recognizing that all of this is impermanent. I mean, I'm looking at some trees out here. I mean, those trees may not be here in 50 to 100 years. Everything is impermanent that's material. So we're not. There's a part of us that is eternal. So how do we get back there? And that takes conscious thought and it's self-examination and paying attention.
I agree. One of the interesting descriptions of that stage is in the Hindu yoga. In Hindu yoga, this is regarded as the final stage at which union with the divine is reached. The union with the divine, is that where the illusion of separateness just goes away and we come together with the oneness?
No, my experience was that. So the individual consciousness seeks to exist. The individual soul seeks to exist. When you look at the river, when you look at water coming down the mountain, and we're surrounded by mountains here, but when you see water flowing from the river, coming down the mountain, it goes into the ocean. That river ends. It's done. It's gone. And so Samadhi is very much like that. That individual consciousness merges into this vast ocean of unity consciousness, cosmic consciousness. So in that moment, and there is no linear time in that realm. So in that moment, you can connect to every living thing that there is because it's just one huge field of existence. And, that was my experience. And I had no idea just how interconnected every living thing is us on this planet. So when I came back, I wasn't just going for a walk in the park. I was looking at the trees and figuring out, whoa, these roots go down here, and just imagine how much energy is feeding these trees and how they're all connected to everything. And, so the whole concept of the world changed because you're seeing the interconnections with everything else. The sun comes out and certain flowers open up. Why is that? The intelligence of life became my new library. I started studying that. And so this is where your awareness really gets heightened when you've had such, I guess what I would call an expansive spiritual experience. You begin to pay attention to everything deeper.
For someone that wants to really learn more about this, where do they start? What books do they read? What kind of advice would you give someone who wants to start on the spiritual path?
I would encourage them to get acquainted with and begin to get comfortable with meditation. And I'm not going to suggest any specific kind. We're all different. There's two types of meditation, active and passive. For me, passive doesn't work. I can't sit there and not move. I need an active meditation. So whether it's a guided meditation you're listening to, whether it involves breath work, I need to walk. I do walking meditations. I need to move my body while I meditate. Find the type of meditation that speaks to you and start getting into a regular rhythm and routine. Maybe it's, after dinner, or maybe it's the first 30 minutes in the morning. Get into a regular routine of tuning in with yourself. That's step one. Very important. You can't be scattered, waiting for Starbucks or whatever, getting some caffeine first. Oh yeah, I've been up for 30 seconds. I need caffeine. No, stop it. Right? So start getting in touch with yourself in different ways. And there's many ways to meditate. You can meditate with music, guided, silent, walking, find what works for you, but make it a daily routine, and things will start to unfold, guaranteed.
Excellent. Dawn, thanks so much for joining us today. How can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, pretty easy. It's my name, dawnjames.ca. Everything I do, I teach, my mission is there. The Raise Your Vibration trilogy of books. My autobiography, launching March 2021, called Unveiled. Just go to dawnjamesunveiled.com. You can sign up for the pre-launch and check out the trailer.
Excellent. I will make sure to put that in the show notes. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. This is Johnny Burke. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.